Welcome into the Simmons Scoop with Chad Simmons. We are shooting this on Wednesday, June 18th. Chad is out in LA covering the Elite 11. I'm just glad we could get him in here for some intel today. Before we get going, though, guys, do me a favor right now and hit that subscribe button. Look, we're trying to get this thing to 100K before the season starts. I think we can do it. Hit subscribe. All right, let's bring in Director of Recruiting here at I was going to say at Chad Simmons, at On3, Chad Simmons. Let's start with Georgia. We just had a really exciting commitment here on the On3 Recruits channel. Ekene Agboko, a top 100 recruit, committed to Georgia. Georgia's sixth top 100 recruit of this cycle. What's next for the Dogs on that offensive line? Are they done?
Yeah, I mean, they hope not. I mean, they're going to add more. I would say you have to go and try to probably start with Malachi Lee, a monster of a human from out in Hawaii. Him and his family were back in Athens for the second time in the last couple of months, this past weekend for an unofficial visit this time. And I think, to me, that speaks volumes about where Georgia's at on that list for Lee and his family. Obviously, he's a top guy for Georgia. We feel Georgia's one of his top schools as well. He'll be at Michigan this weekend for an OV. We think Texas is a strong player in this race. And you have Alabama right there as well. As those four schools, we think he commits sometime likely in July, if not late June, but sometime in the next week or two as well. And he's a very high priority for Georgia. Then, a guy that was there with him last weekend on an official visit for him was Dre Quinn, a kid out of Colorado, moved down to play at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. He'll be at Tennessee this weekend. Ohio State showed him a great time in Columbus 2 weeks ago. But we think Miami and Georgia are and really have been setting the pace in this race. USC is trying to hang around as well. But from my sources, it is neck and neck between Miami and Georgia at the top of this list. We think, at one time he wanted to take this thing into the season, maybe see some games, but we think Breck probably decides sometime this summer, likely in July, and it would be a surprise if it's not Georgia or Miami.
Yeah, here we are sitting at June 18th, and, to think 5 or 6 weeks from now, I mean, this Georgia class is going to be basically done. I mean, there'll be a couple spots left to fill, but there's more to come. Let's start with Georgia target safety, Tyreek Green. Is this one trending in the Dogs' direction as well?
Yeah, he was back on campus at Georgia this past weekend as well. And yes, I do like where Georgia sits, and I have liked Georgia's position in this race for months. For me, when I hear the buzz behind the scenes that he is Kirby's guy, I've had multiple sources tell me that Kirby is playing a big role in his recruitment, that Kirby, Glenn Schumann, that staff, Travaris Robinson, Dante Williams, all love what he brings Green to the table. From a versatile DB, he plays at Buford High School, close friends with KJ Bold, and spent a lot of time with KJ on the OV this past weekend. But he'll be at Florida State this weekend coming up. We think Miami is a competitor in this recruitment as well. Auburn's had him on campus too, but we think they all, if they want to get Tyreek Green, have to figure out a way to knock Georgia off the top.
Okay, let's stay on the defensive side of the ball with edge Kamari Brooks. Yesterday, you reported some big news. He eliminated a bunch of teams. It's down to 2, Bama or Georgia, and we got a commitment coming up on Monday. How do you read this one?
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of like Breck College, where, we've had a lot of other schools in the mix with Breck, and then with Kamari, the same. Clemson at one time was a competitor, then it was Texas, and it was USC, but we always knew the two constant that were there with Alabama and Georgia, 2 SEC foes, 2 of the top programs in the country that compete for SEC and national championships year in and year out. Look, I think Georgia is going to be hard to beat. I will say this, though, with that I think Bama has made this closer and tighter than a lot of people thought they would, being that he has connections to Georgia. He's been to Georgia 15-plus times. He lives just a few miles from University of Georgia campus right there in Bogart. So, look, a lot of things favor Georgia. We do like their position just a few days away from that announcement, but you cannot sleep, on Alabama. We just like where Georgia sits today, and we think they'll be tough to beat on Monday. But it's been a pretty tight race over the last couple of months with Bama giving him a lot to think about. But Georgia, again, has a great chance to keep a very talented kid,
Yeah.
in their backyard at home next week.
Yeah, and we're going to be hosting that one right here on the On3 Recruits channel, so make sure you guys are subscribed. All right, we're going to switch over to the offensive side of the ball. I want to talk about five-star tight end Kaden Prothrow because he was at Georgia the weekend that Mark Bowman, Georgia's other top tight end target, committed to USC. So all the focus went to Kaden Prothrow, but he didn't pop to Georgia that weekend and has since been taking visits. So where do you see Kaden Prothrow in Georgia at this moment?
Yeah, Prothrow will do things on his timeline the way he likes to do it, just very slow, lethargic. He takes the process very seriously, and every visit is big for him and his family. And with him, he's not a big talker, so you have to kind of dig through different sources, that people either in his circle, people that know his people in his circle, and try to piece it all together. But nothing has told me anything different than Georgia remains the team to beat. He's been to Florida, he's been to Auburn, he's been to Alabama, he goes to Texas this next weekend. That's one that we're watching very closely. Texas came in a little bit later in the process, got him on campus for the first time in Austin this spring, and we feel the Longhorns are definitely a contender here. But again, it's kind of common talking about these guys, all have to go through the in-state school, and that's Georgia. Georgia has the longest relationship with Todd Hartley leading the way in the tight ends room. He's an in-state kid. He's been to Georgia way more than anywhere else, 10-plus times. His family knows the staff. We know, obviously, what Georgia does with tight ends in their offensive scheme under Mike Bobo. So, look, they have a very good one committed in Lincoln Keys. They love him as well. They would love nothing more than to add Kaden Prothrow to this class as well.
All right, one more Georgia target on the offensive side of the ball. Jay Lamar, this one's interesting because running back Jay Lamar visited Miami last weekend. We talked with Stephen Wagner from Cane Sport, and he thought that the Canes really made a move. However, it's Georgia's turn this weekend, official visit. Jay Lamar is going to be in Athens. How do you see this recruitment? Is this a pivotal weekend?
Very pivotal, I think, for Georgia. Look, I think he's been Georgia's top running back, for some time. I mean, obviously, Savion Hyder, you can talk about him being the elite kid in this class too, but just being realistic, talking Georgia's chances, and who Georgia really likes is Jay Lamar. He's an in-state kid from Colquitt County, and look, we saw a kid like Usmani Cromah, who we thought would end up at Georgia from South Georgia this past cycle in 2025, go to Florida State on signing day. So nothing's ever a slam dunk in recruitment, and Georgia got on him early in the fall last year. He's been there numerous times. He has a great connection with Coach Crawford and Kirby Smart and company at Georgia. But Miami is a real threat to the in-state program in Athens, Georgia. Georgia wants Jay Lamar. I think Jay Lamar really likes Georgia, but Miami is giving him a lot to think about from his time there earlier this spring to the OV as well. Clemson remains another school to watch in this race. We think it's those three, but I think Miami is Georgia's biggest competition, and some think it's super, super close between Miami and Georgia heading into this weekend. So if Georgia wants to add him, he commits next week on June 25th. 2 or 3 days after he leaves Athens. Can Georgia get this one done and lock it up before he leaves Athens? That's a big storyline we're watching this weekend.
All right, Dog fans, you talk to Chad and I. You guys are the real experts. Get in the comment section. Who do you guys feel good about? And do you agree with us? Is Georgia just about to go on their run? Let us know. Comment section below. All right, we're going to talk a little Texas Longhorn recruiting, and it just seemed, Chad, it's five-star weekend after five-star weekend. So we're going to talk a little bit about last weekend and a little bit about this weekend. The last weekend, five-star linebacker Xavier Griffin was on campus, and all the buzz heading into that visit was around Alabama. But coming out of that visit, do we need to pay a little bit more attention to Texas and Xavier Griffin?
Yeah, I think Steve Wilfong and I both have always said you have to watch Texas in this race. And one thing that seems pretty common to me covering Xavier since that decommitment to USC is every time he goes on a campus somewhere, the buzz picks up around that school, whether it was Ohio State, Alabama, and now Texas. He goes to Florida State this weekend. We think there's somewhat of a dark horse in this recruitment. But look, Texas, from what I've gathered, knocked it out of the park last weekend with Xavier, his family, his mom specifically, answered a lot of questions, laid out their plan for him as a kind of a hybrid linebacker, edge rush guy, how they want to use him to get to the quarterback in their defensive scheme under Coach PK. And he had some time with Coach Nansen, Coach Clark, and they laid out the plan. And look, coming off that trip, there is some real buzz around the Texas Longhorns now becoming the team to beat. But again, It's been pretty common after that with Ohio State and Alabama as well. But we think Alabama and Texas are the two battling right now. And Texas made a huge move, huge impression with that family last weekend.
All right. With the next name, I think I'm having a little deja vu. Linebacker Tyler Atkinson is going to be at Texas this weekend. And it feels much like Xavier Griffin was last week, where Texas was kind of on the outside looking in, but then after the visit, we fully expect Texas to be a player. Is this how it's going to be with Tyler Atkinson? Like right now, it feels like Texas is a fringe school in his recruitment, but do you think this is going to be a repeat?
Yeah, I mean, you cannot sleep on the Longhorns. Yeah, we heard a lot of buzz about Ohio State and maybe them getting that last official visit this weekend to Columbus, but this has kind of been in the works for some time, talking to different sources the last few weeks. I mean, like I said in the story on 3 earlier, he's practically been living in Austin, Texas over the last month and a half since school got out. He's been training with former Texas Longhorn Derek Johnson, doing things for his body in preparation for a huge senior season at Grayson High School. They go back for a repeat for a state championship run, and the communication has been strong. Steve Sarkisian is taking the lead role in this recruitment. Johnny Nansen's also highly involved, the linebackers coach. But look, he went to Clemson, he went to Oregon, he went to Georgia. Now he goes to Texas. When Tyler takes a visit, that means he's serious about that school. Texas will have their opportunity to make their pitch from the NIL side, the defensive scheme fit side, their culture. I think he'll get the red carpet rolled out for him, a lot like Xavier Griffin, like you said last weekend. Texas has the prime opportunity to make that big move, that lasting impression, the last visit before he makes that decision.
Yeah, I just have a feeling that this could turn into like a Justice Terry situation, where when Justice Terry made that first trip to Austin, we thought, oh, that's cute. He's taking all his visits. Nothing to worry about here. Then when he left, all the experts were saying, no, there's much more to this than people think. And then, of course, Justice Terry ends up picking the Longhorn. So we'll have to see if that's how Tyler Atkinson's recruitment goes. Let's talk about one more 5-star. He was on campus last week, and that's Felix Ojo, the big offensive tackle. I thought maybe he was going to commit coming off that weekend, but it looks like he has more visits he wants to take.
Maybe he wants to hit the slopes out there in Utah one time before all the snow melts, I guess, out there in the
How much is Utah a player for 5-star Felix Ojo?
I mean, I can't even give you a number, probably 0, but look, they're getting him on campus. There's communication there. We'll see what happens, but look, we feel that Texas remains in a prime position to keep Felix Ojo at home. Flood and company, the offensive line staff, and obviously Sark's involved too, have had him and his family on campus countless times. The relationships are there. Business has been discussed. He feels he can play. He can be developed. He canceled the Oklahoma OV, which was originally scheduled for this weekend, coming up to add Utah in there. We thought, like you said, maybe he commits on that visit at Texas. Who knows? Maybe he did. Just hasn't announced it yet. But look, we like Texas's position. We think they'll be very tough to beat. Ohio State's been involved. Florida's been in the mix. He's been to Ole Miss. Different schools have come and different schools have gone. Texas has remained the same, and we think that's the top school right now on that list.
All right, so let's talk a little about the defensive line, because it seems like Texas right now is making a concerted effort to land another elite defensive line class. I mean, this is just what Texas does. 2 names I want you to hit on right now are defensive lineman Vodney Cleveland, and also you got some news on James J.J. Johnson, who's the top defensive lineman out of the state of Florida.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they want to add big bodies. Sark knows. He's coached in the SEC before. You win in the trenches in the SEC. When you win the SEC, you have a good chance to win the national championship. So he wants to build from inside the trenches out. And like you said, Bodney Cleveland's on commitment watch. He has that date set for this weekend. And anytime, typically a kid sets that date coming off a visit somewhere, this time it's Texas, that school is usually in a pretty good spot. We like where Texas sits. He was a one-time Alabama commitment. Auburn's been in the mix. Florida's had some real buzz around that program as well. But another great trip to Austin, Texas. Kenny Baker's done a great job building that relationship. They've made him feel like a priority. We like where Texas sits for Bodney Cleveland, just a few days out from that announcement. Somewhat of a new one is James Johnson. He's an elite talent, a top 50 recruit in the country from down at Miami Northwestern High School. He's been to Georgia, Florida, and Miami the last few weeks. Texas has been in the mix, been in communication. Now they get the last official visit of the summer. They're going to take a big swing here. Look, we've heard the most buzz around Georgia and Miami being the two schools fighting for that top spot. Texas has a chance to make it a three-team race. And we're not ruling Florida out as well. Just the buzz has been more around Georgia and Miami the last couple of months, and even coming off the official visits as well. But look, Texas is going to make a big run this weekend, throw their best offer to him on the field, off the field, make their pitch about why Texas is the best school for him and his family, and we'll see what we can gather from that. But look, he's taking this visit. Texas is on the radar. They have a big chance to make a move here against schools like the Gators, Bulldogs, and Hurricanes.
Speaking of making a move, two more on the defensive side of the ball I want to ask you about. Linebacker Braden Rouse. Seems like Texas is in a good spot there. And also safety Samari Matthews recently left campus as well, and it seems like the Horns could be trending for that one.
Yeah, I'll start with Samari Matthews. I think this is a monster weekend for him and his family going back to South Carolina for the final visit up in Columbia. And, I would say 6 months ago, South Carolina was the team to beat. Once Texas got involved and got him on campus in the spring, that momentum switched. The race got tighter. Florida State's been in the mix. But I think it's Texas versus South Carolina. Can Beamer and company grab that momentum back right now? We like where Texas sits for Samari Matthews, one of the top prospects in North Carolina. He's been there twice. They've made a big move this spring and summer. The longevity goes to South Carolina. He's been there for a couple of years, many times to Columbia. He has real relationships with that staff, starting with Shane Beamer, the head coach. So they have a chance to kind of grab that momentum back, but Texas is trending heading into this weekend with Braden Rouse, an in-state guy for where I live in Georgia, Kell High School in Marietta. I think it's UT versus UT. Texas has come on strong. Alabama's in the mix. Michigan's been involved as well. But Texas did a great job this past weekend with Braden Rouse, answering questions about how he fits into the scheme, where they would use him, the path to the field. And I think he loved everything he heard and saw in Austin, the team that's been setting the pace in this race for, I would say, going back to last year, is the University of Tennessee, the other UT, where he'll be in Knoxville this weekend. I think the race has gotten tighter. I still think he's Tennessee's to lose this weekend, but Tennessee has made this much tougher on Josh Heupel and company that I think we thought they would, over the last few weeks.
All right, one more prospect I got to ask you about. It's Dre Quinn. He's from Buford High School in Norcross, Georgia, and he's making his decision right here on the On3 Recruits channel tomorrow, so you guys make sure you are subscribed for that. Now, Dre Quinn is a major target of the Texas Longhorns, but how do you see this recruitment going right now as we're about 24 hours out from a decision?
Yeah, he's announced the final two, so we know it's Clemson versus Texas. At different times, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Tennessee, Notre Dame. Other schools have been involved, but this is Dabo versus Sark, and again, it kind of goes back to a little bit like Braden Rouse or even Samari Matthews with longevity being on Clemson's side. They've been there from the beginning. He's been there more to Death Valley than he has to Austin, but something about those trips when those guys go to Austin, Texas, they come back feeling really, really good about the Texas Longhorns, and they got the last visit from Dre Quinn. Coming off that visit, he was thinking about committing on Tuesday earlier this week. He pushed it back to Thursday to give himself more time and his family more time to think, figure things out. This race could go either way. Does he go Texas, the high school that's come on strong in the summer, or with Clemson, the school that's been there for a year plus. He has maybe deeper relationships with that staff, from Chris Rump, Coach Eason. This one could go either way. It's a very tight race. I'm not even sure if a final decision has been made or told to a staff just yet either. So, look, it's going to be a fun one to watch. Does he go with the hot team now, Texas, or go back to who's been with him for a year plus, Clemson? It's one to watch here on 3 on Thursday.
All right, Texas fans, get in here. It's going to be another busy weekend in Austin. Chime in. Who do you think Texas is going to land? Let us know. Comment section below.